and welcome. Whatever your reason for choosing this episode, let me say I'm so glad you're joining me. I think this is a really meaningful conversation. It was for me, and so I hope you can find some value in it too. As always, I'm Abbie, this is Stories to Live, Stories Told, and here's what I know. We create our social worlds through communication. That's the main claim of the communication theory, coordinated management and meaning, which is the foundation for this podcast, the perspective, the lens that we use to hear our stories through. And when I'm talking about communication, I'm talking about the way that we show up to people in our lives and the interaction that we have with those people. It's not just about the fact that we do show up, it's about how we show up, and we have choices in how we show up, and that can be easy to forget if we fall into repetitive patterns or don't take the time to reflect and question the messages that we've been given about what it means to show up. The point of this podcast, then, is to be one big reminder of the choices that we have when it comes to how we communicate, and also the kind of social worlds we want to be creating. Today, we're continuing our conversation with Jennifer Furlong. She is the host of the Communication 24/7 podcast. If you haven't listened to part 1 of our conversation, you'll definitely want to do that first, since we'll be jumping right back into the middle of that conversation. Before we do, though, some questions I would keep in mind as you join us in conversation today are: how did you learn to process negative feelings? How can zooming out help you to gain perspective? And what might change if you started using the platinum rule instead of the golden rule? All of these are things we're going to get into with Jennifer today. So let's jump right back in. The language that resonates with me is that I want to be intentional in how I'm communicating. And that goes back to, making a choice. And again, it's about me making a choice about my actions, not trying to control other people's actions. But if you're going to be intentional, you have to have some perspective. And so to me, the communicating about how we communicate is like being able to like zoom out on yourself and almost watch yourself communicate in a moment, or to look back and reflect. I think that reflecting and taking time to reflect is so important. And, you even talked about kind of a like micro example of that, of as you're journaling, as you are in this very negative space, you're able to like zoom out on yourself and say, is this what I want for myself right now? Or is this helpful for myself right now?
Yeah.
And, not to say that the negative emotions or experience of life don't exist, and it's not in an effort to smooth those over, put a silver lining behind it. But human experience is very complex. And so a lot of time that like negative exists with the positive, the grief, the sadness, the sorrow exists at the same time as the joy, the negative, the bad firsts exist at the same time as the good firsts for you. And you were saying, I have a choice in what I focus on right now.
Yeah.
I mean, people do talk about like, a gratitude practice or whatever.
Right.
And I do think there is some power in that.
I think there's power in practicing gratitude, but I think there's also power in recognizing where your more visceral emotions come from, the negative emotions. I give myself permission to have a temper tantrum. If I'm feeling a certain kind of way about something, taking off that wedding band, that was huge, you know.
You'd be lying if you didn't let yourself have any emotional reaction to that.
If I say, oh, you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to focus on everything else. And it's like, look, you cannot take shortcuts to this. People who try to take shortcuts and don't talk about their feelings and don't do the process of working through those negative feelings, they always pay for it in the end. You can try to, ignore it, but it's going to come back to you. I promise you it will. And so you have to give yourself permission to be human, and to be human is to understand when it sucks, and it's okay to recognize
right.
And allow yourself to feel the anger and the sadness and the bitterness and everything that comes along with it, while also recognizing I can't wallow in this forever. let me feel it. Let me get it out of my system. So sometimes I'll even say, all right, you got a good 20 minutes. Scream if you need to scream,
Mm-hmm.
cuss, do whatever, all the filth and foul and filth words that you can think of, do whatever it is to get it out of your system, because you got to get it out of your system. And then I can have a moment to think about, all right, now let me have some balance here, because there are some good things. And I know that I'm going to be okay.
Right.
It's not what I had envisioned, but I do have the opportunity now to try to create a new story for myself. And how do I want that to look?
Right.
In some small way that is even a little bit exciting, to think about that.
Yeah. And it's almost like getting to the point where you can see it as that does not negate, whatever led up to that.
Yeah.
Like, I shouldn't have cried because I should have just, seen it as this. It's like the tears, the tantrum, the whatever
You
is
had to
what
do that.
gave you the perspective for that. Like I am always a supporter of a good cry. Like that is a physical experience that I've had that I know makes a difference for me. And even now I can understand it more scientifically. There's an author, Emily Nagoski, and she talks about stress, and she's saying crying or, being physical. There's a number of different things that help you complete the stress cycle.
Yeah.
And that's why it feels like a release. That's why I can sob and sob and sob and then look around and say, okay, I'm good, and move on.
You take that deep breath.
Yeah. I don't always know how to explain it to other people. So I'm like, sorry if that was really jarring for you, that I was just sobbing my eyes out and now I'm laughing.
Yeah.
But that's what really just happened to me.
I feel better now. Yeah.
Letting myself have those emotions gave me the perspective. And also I've just been thinking about kind of all the levels of communication, because my experience is in studying interpersonal communication. And it seems like you've had this experience with the public communication, your TED Talks, being a teacher, a million other things. You've experienced at the level that I would call organizational communication, with doing your consulting and interpersonal. And then the one I think about less, but it's still kind of there in its own way, is intrapersonal.
Yeah,
communicating within ourselves. And something that really does resonate with me is, which I was thinking about when you're talking about reacting versus responding, is that it's helpful for me to see, anxiety that shows up in my life, like deep sadness, depression, as something outside of myself. To say, it is not me. I am me, and I get to choose how I receive this, or at least recognize there's something that has, come into my body, come into my mental space that I did not choose for myself, but now it's here. Let me decide how I'm going to process this. And hearing, the voices in your head, it's almost like if you're hearing that voice in your head say that anxious thing, you're not that voice. Like if you're the one listening, you're not the one talking. So you get to choose if you believe that to be true or not. And that's maybe the same with those reactive thoughts. If you think that really mean thing, if you think whatever action you want to do next, that's not to say that that is the thing that you have to do because you thought it. You get to take that in and decide if you want to take that in from that voice. It's like, you talked about, you can disinvite people from your table, and maybe that's your friends, maybe it's people you work with, maybe it's your family. And then I'm picturing like a teeny tiny table in my head of different voices too. Is that it exists on that level too, of what voices, the voice of anxiety, the voice of reason, logic, all those voices have a seat at your mental table. And so if you can, have the language to communicate about the communication that goes on in your own brain, that maybe sets you up even better to communicate about the communication that goes on in your relationships.
Yeah. Number one, I love that you brought up intrapersonal communication, because you are 100% right on that. And that's one of the things about the whole, communicating, about how we communicate. And earlier I had mentioned, have the courage to peel back those layers. And sometimes we need help with doing that. Look, I'm in therapy. Okay. I have no shame in admitting.
I love it.
I talk to my therapist, regularly. I mean, it's on the calendar regularly for me to be able to talk with someone, because, sometimes you have to deal with things from your past to be able to get to the point where you can have that internal dialogue and get to the place where you can respond versus reacting. For myself, I grew up in a broken home. My parents got divorced when I was really, really, really young. I think I was about 5 years old, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And in both homes, there was a lot of alcoholism, a lot of drug abuse, there was violence. It was not the ideal upbringing, whether I was at my dad's place or my mom's place.
Mm-hmm.
And so I witnessed a lot, as a child. And as a result, I learned to go inside myself and I learned to swallow my emotions because it wasn't going to do anything. It wasn't going to make anything better.
Yeah.
And so I was the person for the longest time, even up through well into adulthood. I don't hug people. I don't get close to people. It's very difficult for me to be empathic to others because I know what I had to go through, to get where I am today. And so you shut down emotions very easily to just not address it. You just think, oh, that's not working. Tears don't do you any good. Let's move forward. And that worked for a while. It worked for a very long time for me, especially when I was in the military. It's like, I don't have time to be emotional about this. Shut that crap down.
Right. That just reinforced that same story for you. Yeah.
And so you do have moments in life where that can be a really good skill to have. It can be helpful, especially when you're dealing with traumatic situations. Like even today, I'm very good with traumatic situations. Like I stay calm. I don't overreact to anything. I'm able to just kind of sit there and think and then move forward. But I was not always good with the personal stuff, the relationship stuff. But having a therapist and going through therapy and kind of dissecting how that came to be, it was so incredibly helpful. And now I am a completely different person today than I was even, 2 years ago, definitely 5 years, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And so, it's a process. We are a work in process. And if you have things from your past that are having that negative impact on your ability, to be able to connect with others, to have these meaningful, relationships, there is no shame in getting help, in recognizing that, and then figuring out how to address that. And that's really what all the internal is all about, and all that internal work. If you can address those things, it's going to seep through. It's going to bubble out no matter how hard we try to hide these things. And so it's only going to serve you to address those. And it's going to make you a stronger person and a better communicator. At the end of the day, it's going to have a profound impact on you as an individual and your relationships as well. Even when your relationships end up not working out like mine, I feel like I'm in a much better place today. I don't think I would have been able to get through it like I am now if this had happened 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah. That's just a testament to how much, that internal work, that if you can continue to work on it. Yeah.
What I think is that all these levels, I guess is the word I'm going to use, of communication, this public speaking, big audience kind of thing, this organizational, interpersonal, intrapersonal, whatever, is that they're all a lot more similar than maybe you'd think on the surface. And the way I see that, maybe taking out the intrapersonal, but it's all just people. It's all just human relationships. If you are giving a TED Talk, it's one person talking to many, many other people. Organizations are made up of human beings. interpersonal relationship, obviously, maybe that's one-on-one, maybe that's a family setting, whatever, that's all human relationships. And so I'm curious about, from your perspective as someone who's been a coach, who's been a consultant, who's been a teacher, do you see it that same way of the connection between those levels? Is there tips, advice, skills that you have used yourself, that you've given students, that you've given clients that kind of work at each of those levels for the problem solving, for managing conflict, for navigating those difficult conversations?
Yeah, I think the number one thing that is most important, regardless if you're talking about one-on-one conversations all the way up through giving a speech to however many people, fill in the blank, being tuned into who you are talking to. I think that's the most important aspect. Sometimes you have to put ego in the back seat. You have to be willing to put ego away and understand that if I want to get my message across, I'm going to have to think about them, and I'm going to have to think about, how can I send this message in a way that they're going to be open to receive it and that they're going to understand it in the way that I want them to understand it. Because as you know, being a communication person, we all come from different frames of reference, right? And so the lens through which we see the world is going to be shaded slightly differently for everybody. So that can be a challenge for a communicator. Of course, we don't know everybody, and we can't anticipate, all the things that have happened to everybody in the world. But we can just take a moment and try to come from that place of understanding. We call that being audience centered, right? Just trying to put it out there in a way that we think they're going to be able to relate to it, for one. So I think this is the most important thing, coming from a place of thinking about them and how I can send this message. I think the second most important thing is listening. And yeah, even as a public speaker, not listening in the traditional sense, but paying attention to how your audience is reacting, to whatever it is you're saying. And then as a person engaged in a, one-on-one conversation, being in tune with what that person is saying, whether it's through their nonverbals or the words that they're choosing to use. And so a lot of people are surprised when I start talking about being a better communicator. You have to learn to be silent. You have to observe. You have to listen. That's the key right there to developing your communication skills. It's not, how many people can I entertain, and can I be the loudest person in the room? Can I talk faster? How can I get the attention? I just want the attention on me. No, it's, if you truly, truly want to be able to effectively communicate and create these relationships where you can impact change, then you got to be able to pay attention.
Yeah.
You got to be able to listen, and you got to be able to observe, and then, make decisions on how to move forward.
You're giving us a great segue to the next thing I want to talk about, which is the platinum rule, which you've given a TED Talk about, you've written about, extensively. I just want to hear you kind of explain that and, your experience with that.
Yeah. The platinum rule, I was the first time I read about the platinum rule, I remember I was an undergraduate, and I cannot remember which class it was. It was one of those umpteen million communication books, right? We had to read through. And it was in the very front of the textbook, where the author of the textbook was talking about, the things that influence them and their career, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that was said was, begin to learn to use the platinum rule rather than the golden rule. And I was like, what does that mean? What is that? So we all Anybody growing up is pretty familiar with the golden rule. It's treat others the way you want to be treated, and it's pretty universal. I mean, and I talk about this in my TED Talk, pretty much every major religion in the world has a version of the golden rule. And, it's a fantastic rule to start with to teach little kids, because it's the very beginnings of trying to understand what empathy means. Oh, you wouldn't want that to happen to you, so don't do that to somebody else, But as we get older and our relationships become a little more challenging, whether it's a romantic relationship, our friendships, our family members, all of those things, it's really easy for us to, in our ego, to look at all situations through our own lens. Say, well, I would have done this, and I would have said that, and I would not have done this, and I think this is the best way. And really, at the end of the day, not everybody is like you. Not everybody has the same experiences, the same likes, dislikes, values, beliefs. And your truth is not necessarily synonymous with the truth. We all experience the world in different ways. And so to be able to recognize someone else and treat them the way they want to be treated, that's what the platinum rule is all about. And I think that's a really powerful thing, especially when you have long-term meaningful relationships, to just keep in mind. It's almost like the 5 love languages. Anybody who's read that book, and when you begin to understand how someone else operates, how someone else expresses their gratitude, their love. And it could be a completely different way of expressing their gratitude or love than how you express it. It doesn't mean that it's not as valid. It's just different. And so with the platinum rule, if you can learn to recognize that, my best friend, Allison, when she sees, she might be out and about, and, she sees something that she knows that I'm going to like, and it doesn't matter. It could be from the dollar store, she'll pick it up. This reminded me of you. That's how she's expressing her love for me. Now, I'm not like a gift giver, but I know that that's, this is kind of going into the 5 love languages, but it's very in tune with the platinum rule. Like, I know that that's how she expresses herself. And so I do the same thing, even though that's not naturally how I express, a connection with someone. But then I'll be out and about and I'll see something and be like, that's pretty cool. Okay. I might pick that up for her and send that to her, just so she'll know that I'm thinking about her. And that will be a much more meaningful interaction for her, because she's going to be able to, relate to that. And so treating others the way they want to be treated. Again, ego, put it in the back seat and really think about them. And it's not for us to decide, well, I think that's stupid. Well, okay, yeah, think it's stupid, but at the end of the day, do you want to be able to have a meaningful relationship? And do you want to be able to do something for somebody that, they really are going to be able to feel that positive, feeling you want them to get? Then do it in a way that they're going to be able to get it. So that's the platinum rule.
Yeah. I think the cool distinction that I'm seeing in this conversation is that there is a difference between the platinum rule of treating people how they want to be treated, the idea of, like being audience centered that you just talked about. That is distinctively different than what we talked about earlier of like controlling people.
Yeah.
You can't control other people. What you can do is get in tune with them and pay attention to them.
Yes.
And you said, I don't know the right word. It's not accommodate is not necessarily the right word, but learn to work in collaboration with other people to pick up on the things that they are communicating, when you're listening, when you're in relationship with people. Yeah, I just think that's kind of an important distinction.
Yeah,
you're not controlling people, but how are you taking them into account?
Right. Yeah.
At every level, like you're saying, in your interpersonal, in your closest relationships, in your workplace, in your public speaking, or doing something like a podcast that both of us do that is putting something out into the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you said something very important there as well. It's not, not accommodating, because that's what I think the misconception can come in sometimes with the platinum rule. It's not that you are accommodating someone else all the time, because we know that it's important. You got to have balance, because you have a point of view, you have opinions, and you have every right to be able to express your point of view, talk about your opinions and share your beliefs. But we can balance being able to share what we think about something in a way that they're going to be more apt to continue to listen. So, for example, it's completely ineffective to yell at somebody else, right? We know, even if we're angry, to yelling at somebody or demeaning them in front of people, or, diminishing the value that they bring to the relationship, or, what they have done at work. That's so completely the wrong way to go about things. But you can absolutely learn how to share and be authentic in what you think about a situation, while being honest and also compassionate at the same time. And I think that's, the word you hit on was, being in tune with them, or at least collaborating. That's really that balance that we're trying to strive for. So don't discount your own feelings, or feel like you have to in some way acquiesce to the other person in order to make the relationship work, because that might work in the short term, but it's not going to work in the long term, because then you're going to begin to feel dissatisfied in that relationship. So you have to be able to express yourself as well.
Yeah, when I start thinking about communication, human experience, human relationships, it's just all so complex. And I think taking a communication perspective, for me, doing things like this podcast, what you do with your podcast, what you do with your work, it's all about giving people the tools to exist in that complexity.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I think there's a richness that comes. It's, at least I can only speak for myself. I've experienced a richer life when I've been able to look at communication and been able to zoom out on my life, when I've been able to add that layer, peel back the layers like you were talking about, and kind of see what was going on from a different perspective. Yeah, there's just so much complexity, and it's a disservice if we're just always running away or trying to oversimplify that.
Yeah.
But I think communication, talking about communication, communicating about communication is in a lot of ways what can give people some tools, to me, some really helpful tools to exist in that complexity. And part of that complexity is kind of what you're just getting at, is that there's this tension between our own experience and other people's experience. Tension, I guess, feels like a negative word, but, just a difference. And they can both be true at the same time.
Yep.
But that creates dissonance for people sometimes internally. And so how do you get good at existing in that dissonance and not, treating people how they want to be treated, not forcing them to have your same perspective or to speak your same love language or, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think tension is a really good word. It makes me think of this guest I had on my podcast one time. He had this wonderful analogy. I absolutely loved it. So I'm going to use it now. He was saying, imagine that you're like a race car, right? You're going down the highway, and this other person that you're in a relationship with, it doesn't matter. It could be a friend, family member, romantic other, and they're in their car, right? And you're going along together you're racing down the highway together, but you begin pulling ahead a little bit, and they're starting to fall behind. And so you have a choice to make now, right? So you're kind of working on yourself, and you're doing the things that you want to do to get better, and you're moving forward, and you have your goals. And this person is kind of like just staying the same. They're not doing anything to move forward with you. You have to choose now. Do I push on the brakes a little bit and slow myself down so that they're not really catching up. I'm like slowing down so I can come back with them? Or do I encourage them? Hey, here's, what can happen, and let's do this together, and encourage them to keep moving along at a similar pace. But what happens if you get too far apart? If you're being held by a rubber band, you get too far apart, that rubber band is going to snap. And so I think, using that word tension, I think that's a really good word to use when we're talking about relationships, because it is a give and take. There is going to be tension. There are going to be conflicts. Every single relationship you get into, they're human beings just like you are, and they're going to say things that are dumb. They're going to do things that are dumb. They're going to, be offensive or whatever, just like you will. And so, at the end of the day, when you're dealing with human beings, having conflict, having that tension is just a part of every relationship.
Yeah.
It's how we learn to manage that tension. How do we learn to manage that conflict?
Yeah.
And again, earlier, like what I said, is sometimes it's just the recognizing that maybe this is something that the rubber band has to break, in order for me not to be held back. Maybe the rubber band has to break, or maybe this is someone I need to disinvite from the table, or maybe this is someone I recognize I need to invite, to my table. It's a very difficult thing to do and to recognize and to move forward with.
Definitely.
Yeah. But that's a part of life. That's a part of navigating different relationships. And you have to take an active part in that and take responsibility for, being able to make those decisions. And it's not always easy, though. It's not.
Right. And I think part of the way that I see it is that, like I said earlier, we're always you said that, we don't exist in a bubble. We're not isolated. We are always in relationship with people in one way or another. The way I'd say it is we're collaborating. When we're talking about the creation of our social worlds, we are co-creators with other people. We don't have full control. And we have this value of like dialogue, being in dialogue with other people and that's specifically as opposed to like a monologue, of like one person talking at someone, a dialogue. Right. There's a sharing of ideas. That shared meaning is created from a number of different perspectives. And that is so much easier said than done, to value dialogue, because it's one of those very complex things, and things that I don't think everybody has the skills to navigate, because it requires practice. It requires, having imperfect communication, going back, looking at it, apologizing for your mistakes, learning from them, taking like a student's perspective and asking where you went wrong. And I think just what's coming out of this conversation for me is that at least one of the ways to help make my ideal of being in dialogue with others more of a reality is to be led by that platinum rule, and it's asking other people how they want to be treated. I think that's not something you have to guess at. I think you can specifically ask that of other people. And then also knowing how to communicate how you want to be treated, so other people don't have to guess for you.
Absolutely.
This is where we end part 2 of our conversation with Jennifer, but I hope you'll come back next Monday for part 3. Usually our conversations are just 2 parts, but this third part with Jennifer is a really important episode. At this point in our conversation, when Jennifer and I were talking, we expressed some differing perspectives, which could have very easily led us to a standstill. But we were both able to speak with curiosity and, like we talked about in part 1, with the desire to understand and also be understood. Even the idea of a conversation like that might make you feel anxious, I'm imagining. But I hope you'll join us for that next Monday, because my hope is that it can be a helpful model for going about those kinds of conversations in our everyday life. Again, it's all about the choices that we have and how we show up to each other. Just because we live in societies that tend to be trending toward being more and more polarized doesn't mean that we don't have options of connecting with people and being curious about people and collaborating with people who do think differently than we do. And when it comes down to it, it feels hard, but it's really not that hard to be led by curiosity. So next Monday, that conversation, I hope you'll join us. In the meantime, though, keep playing around with the ideas that Jennifer talked about today, because I think she left us with some really good ones. As always, I get to do this podcast with support from the CMM Institute for Personal and Social Evolution. You can learn more about them at the links in the description. Also, the music for this podcast is created by Rick Spann, one of the stewards of the CMM Institute and a former conversation partner of the podcast. You can check out that conversation with him also at a link in the description. So huge thank you to Rick for generously sharing his music and helping to add layers of meaning through music. And finally, some next turns. Please follow the show wherever you listen. Leave a review, a rating, share the episode with someone that you want to be a part of this community too. And also, please connect with me on Instagram at Stories Lived, Stories Told Pod, on YouTube at Stories Lived, Stories Told, or on the website at storieslived.storiestold.com. Thank you so much for taking the time to do one or all of these. And thank you for showing up. Thank you for being curious. And thank you for being a part of this story. Until next time, I'm Abbie, and this has been Stories Lived, Stories Told.